Okay, we're in Luke, the 16th chapter, and we've been talking about the rich man and Lazarus. And I do apologize for the fact that we have a run-on sentence or run compound word with rich man, and I didn't see it when I was making the slides, so there should be a space. So just look at it with one eye or somehow or another envision it with the space there. And just realize that sometimes there's a space in between my ears. Oh, and Linda, I heard that one. All right, let's go back into Luke 16. And in Luke 16, we've been looking at any number of different things that are refuted as a result. And we're not going to go back and repreach all of it because there are several things that are definitely taught against. And so we were talking about the fact that death is a reality, that sickness and sin are reality, that some of the teachings that are found running around society today are just as fallacious as the day is long, and that death is real, that we will pass from this life eventually. So let's get back into it and talk about mysticism. So in Luke 16, verses 23 and down through 26, we find that the individuals in Hades lifted up his eyes, being in torment, saw Abraham far away, Lazarus in his bosom, and he cried out and said, "Father Abraham, have mercy on me. Send Lazarus that he may dip the tip of the finger in water and cool off my tongue, for I am in agony in this flame." Abraham said, "Child, remember that during your life you received your good things, likewise Lazarus bad things. But now here he is being comforted, and you are in agony. And besides all of this, between us and you, there is a great chasm fixed, in order that those who wish to come over from here to you may not be able, and that none may cross over from there to us." Well, he lays it out very, very clearly, very, very plainly. And number one, can there be communication? If you look at verses 30 and 31, is there communication between those on earth and those that have passed on? And the answer, according to Jesus, is absolutely, unequivocally no. Now, people say, well, wait a minute. What about Matthew 17? And yes, Matthew 17 is an exception. And it was one where Christ was transfigured with Moses and Elijah, representative of the law and Moses. But it was not transcendent. They came down in person and interacted with Jesus, talking about his departure and other things necessary with respect to his death. But for the idea of somebody that has been departed, communicating, none of that. None of that is seen. Seances, voices from the grave. No. My father does not communicate with me. My mother does not communicate with me, whether it be mother number one or mother number two, whether it be grandfather four. I think I had 4 grandfathers, something like that. Any of the grandmothers? No. Anybody else? Uncles? No. And you'd think if there was a way, they'd communicate. And that's what people say. When I die, I'll communicate. Harry Houdini was a noted magician, a noted escape artist, was heavily involved in mysticism. And he claimed very strongly that he had been in touch with voices from the past. And he indicated that he would communicate. There's been nothing indicating that such is the case. So either Christ is telling the truth, or Christ is a prevaricator, and that we'd be better off home watching the Dodgers rally from a 7-4 deficit and come back and win. But we realize that Christ is not a prevaricator. And that what we look at here, we see, we understand. And we're not thrown by anything that other individuals will put before us. The other thought, and this was something Brittany brought up at lunch. I said, hold on, we'll get to it. The idea of being prayed out of purgatory. Number one, Catholic Dictionary, depending on which one you use, page 701. They openly admit that there is no such thing as purgatory, that it was a creation of theirs. It is an imprimatur book, which means that that definition, that which is found therein, is what the Catholic Church honestly believes. So why then do they teach purgatory? The answer is very clear. Because in other books, other places, you see that as a way of garnering revenue. That you can pray somebody out of purgatory. And I know I've told you in the past, I've done funerals. One of which, very first funeral I ever did, before I even went into preaching full time, was for Linda's uncle. And I was asked if I would do the funeral. And I was told the reason why. Because I wouldn't teach any of that Catholic mumbo jumbo. And I would just teach what the Bible said. And so that's what I did. And the man was lost. He was lost. He never obeyed the gospel. And after I was done, people came up and said, good sermon. And they started handing money to some nuns that were over off to the side and a priest. And they were welcoming the money. So I asked Linda's dad what was going on. Linda's dad, while he went to the Catholic Church, he saw their flaws. And he told me what was happening. And he said, they're receiving money to pray Mel out of purgatory and pray him into a higher level. And I go, but I just said you can't do that. He just kind of shrugged his shoulders. And I saw that replicated over the years. I gave a funeral for a young woman who committed suicide. Catholic Church would not allow the funeral to take place in their quote-unquote sanctuary. They had an auxiliary room. They said her funeral could be there, but a Catholic priest couldn't preach it. So I was a friend of the young woman's mother. She asked me if I would. Same thing. I preached basically the same sermon. The young woman, it was travesty. But yet there they were again, collecting money in order to pray her out of purgatory. Linda's mother, who was a dyed-in-the-wool Catholic, looked at it. She told Linda, why are they giving money to him, i.e. the priest? Bruce did all the work. She knew why they were doing it. She understood it well and clear. But it was beginning to resonate with her. There is, once we leave this life, there is no way to change the determination of where we're going to go. Look back at those verses we just read, verses 23, 24, 25, 26. There is a great chasm fixed. Why? So that none from there, i.e. torments, can come over here to Paradisios. And none from Paradisios can go to Tartarsus or torments. That's why the chasm's fixed. And no amount of money is going to get you anywhere else. But see, we're so used to, in this life, that we've been conditioned that a lot of money in the right palms is going to cover, and pun intended, is going to cover a multitude of sins. And it's not. There's no way that those sins can be covered. Those sins had to be covered prior to departure from this life. And the only way that those sins could be covered is by and through the shed blood of Jesus Christ. So the idea of purgatory is fallacious, absolutely fallacious. And it is part and parcel of what really fueled the Protestant revolution of that and indulgences. Because indulgences was another of those things that was thought up by the hierarchy of the Catholic Church, especially a man by the name of Tesdale. And he thought, well, what we can do is we can sell an indulgence that I'm going to go, and I'm really watering it down and just making it really easy to understand. But basically it is, I know I'm going to sin. So I know that what I'm going to do, I'm going to go to Brittany's house. I'm going to act the fool. I'm going to steal all the cookies and whatnot she made. And I'm going to abscond and leave her with nothing. But because I had an indulgence, that sin isn't going to be held against me. That's roughly what it's saying. So I can premeditate sin, and I can buy my way out before anything happens. It's kind of a convenient way of doing it. Premeditated sin, premeditated indulgence, premeditated absolution, but it's not what the scriptures teach at all. And this chapter, this illustration, this evidentiary action on the part of Lazarus and the rich man when they died is the telling proof. Now also what you'll notice here, passages we read, that there is no doctrine of second chance. Again, a lot of religions teach it. It is a modified form of the concept of purgatory. But they go, well, we're not Catholic, so we don't teach purgatory. Yet, Jehovah's Witnesses teach second chance, as do many others. Some of the premillennial teaching carries embedded in it the idea of second chance. We don't see that here. And again, remember that what Jesus does here in Luke 16 is he pulls back the curtain on the unseen world. Here's what happens after you die, is exactly what Jesus is saying. So when you die, you have an existence. When you die, you immediately know your fate, if you would. You're either in Abraham's bosom, also known as paradise, because that's what Jesus told the thief on the cross, who in essence repented and said, Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom. Jesus said, today you will be with me in paradise. They died. They went to the Hadesian world. Jesus did not remain there. He did not remain in the Hadesian world. He was victorious over the grave. Then he ascended to the right hand of the Father. But prior to his death, he forgave the thief on the cross. And then everybody goes, oh, the thief on the cross was saved. And he was saved simply by asking Jesus. Yeah, he was. I'll grant that. He did not, and he was not baptized. And here's why not. Jesus had not yet died on the cross. Jesus had not yet gone into the grave. Jesus had not yet been raised victorious and declared with power to be the Son of God, as Romans, the first chapter, verse 3 tells us. The gospel had not yet been preached on the day of Pentecost, when they cried out, what must we do, after they had been pierced to the heart by the words Peter had spoken under the inspiration of the Spirit. And Peter said, repent and be baptized, every one of you, for the forgiveness of sins. From that point onward, the only way sins can be forgiven is by and through obedience to the gospel of Christ. So when Christ was on the cross, he could forgive however he wanted, and he did. But now the idea of a second chance, no. And even before Jesus dies on the cross, he's letting this point be brought powerfully home. No second chance. The writer of Hebrews in Hebrews 9, verse 27, as it is appointed for man to die once, And after this comes the judgment. Why? Because I can't change anything after I die. I can't. The Catholic Church teaches something called extreme unction, wherein the priest is called for. The priest then grants absolution and gives the last rites that in the mind of the Catholic ensures that they will be saved. We don't see that in the scriptures. In fact, what we do see in the scriptures is, again in Hebrews, behold, today is the day of salvation. We don't know. We don't know what a day will bring. David writes, there's hardly a step between life and death. Hardly a step. And the reason why that needs to really be etched in us is because of what is taught with regards to the man that was rich and Lazarus. Because once they died, their influence of things on the earth ceased. And everything that they had done up to that point went with them. That's sobering. Absolutely sobering. We have no control over anything. Now, this also brings up a point. A lot of individuals have some issues with regards to what's done with the body. What's done with the body when we die? You just, that's it. The body begins to rot. And you have no control over it. I mean, I could tell Linda, here's what I want done. I've got a right to die card in my wallet. It's in there somewhere. And basically what it says, nope, wrong card. Maybe I don't have it. Maybe it's over here. Anyways, I got a card somewhere. And it says that when I die, my body is to be hauled away. It is to be sent somehow to a mortuary, that they are to hold it, and then this biogift comes in and harvests whatever they want out of it. And then because I've got multiple sclerosis, they then will haul it, and I'm being crass, I know, but they will haul it to a medical center at a university, and then I will be used for all the little junior birdman doctors in training to carve on it and then do what they want in order to understand things. After that, then I will be cremated. But you know what? That's just my body. I'm already dead. I'm already gone. At the point of death, there is a separation. Go over to the book of James. We made reference to it this morning. Go to James, the second chapter. And in James, the second chapter, go down into verse 26. For just as the body without the spirit is dead, so also faith without works is dead. So what that tells me is that basically when I become brain dead, that's it for me. I have no control over anything. Whatever happens, happens. Somebody tried to do a scientific study to find out how much the soul or the spirit weighs. And this was done at the early part of last century. And they had scales for an individual who they knew was going to die shortly. And they were constantly monitoring the weight. And they deduced that at the moment of death, that there was 21 grams that somehow disappeared. And so they began saying, well, the weight of a human soul is 21 grams. You know what? I have a hard time buying that. Because in order for it to have weight and matter, it's got to be physical. And what controls us and directs us is not, it's hard for us to wrap our mind around, but it is that which is not composed of matter. But everything we do in the body that is matter matters afterwards. You see it? And that's what we're dealing with here. So what's going on inside me, who I really am, the soul and the spirit that is inhabiting my body, that's what's going to live on and continue on. And that's what continued on with the rich man, what continued on with Lazarus, and with Abraham, and with everyone else who has gone on before us, and that they have an existence now. And there's not going to be a second chance. And there's not going to be able to be prayed from one point to another, no matter how much money is spent. And there will not be any communication in our loved ones. And we may think that. We may long for it. And then I could begin to talk to you as a psychologist and tell you where that comes from. But I don't want to do that now. It's not the point. Because what Jesus says is true. And there is no communication. I know Austin misses his father. I know it. I know Joy misses Jerry. I miss Jerry. We were talking at lunch. He's my hero for a lot of different reasons. And I've had a lot of people die in my life. People that were very close to me. I miss them. These past 2 years, we've had people we miss here that we've loved and miss. Our son Adam has had 7 or 9, something like friends of his that were close that have died. He just went to another funeral the other day of somebody who died. And we're talking young people. We're talking people in their 30s and 40s and maybe 50. But when they're dead, they're dead. And yeah, it's sorrowful. But we need to be practical. We need to be pragmatic. We need to understand what the truth is. And so those 3 major points right in that one fell section. So what additionally can we take away from the rich man and Lazarus? I mean, because there's got to be more to be taken away. We've already talked about Hebrews 9 and verse 27. We mentioned 2 Corinthians 6 and verse 2. Behold, today is the day of salvation. So what else? Look at James 4 and verse 14. Where we're there in chapter 2 just a moment ago. But look at 4:14. You do not know what your life will be like tomorrow. You are just a vapor that appears for a little while and vanishes away. I don't know about you, but that is sobering. Appears for a little while and then is gone. Gone. And yes, I know that today is the day of salvation. Hebrews 4 and verse 7, I know that. And I know that I need not harden my heart. But you know, I kind of like to think that the world can't get along without me. That if I weren't around, nobody could get along without me. Is that the way you think? Oh, I know you think that about me. I mean, I'm just that integral in all that's done. And the thing is, I say that with a straight face. Look what Solomon writes. Solomon writes in Ecclesiastes, first chapter. And again, he's writing about life and trying to lay it out for his children, what life is all about. So, go down into verse 8. All things are wearisome. Man is not able to tell it. The eye is not satisfied with seeing, nor is the ear filled with hearing. That which has been is that which will be. That which has been done is that which will be done. So there is nothing new under the sun. Is there anything of which one might say, see, this is new, it's already existed for ages, which were before us? There is no remembrance of earlier things, and also of latter things which will occur. There will be for them no remembrance among those who will come later still. Life goes on. In verse 6, he talks about the circulation of the wind, blowing toward the south and turning toward the north. The wind continues swirling along, and on its circular courses, the wind returns. Then he goes on talking about evaporation and condensation, the flow of the rivers. In other words, he's saying life goes on. And we come in and we make a difference in a small sphere of people, but we pass from this life and life goes on. Life goes on. Oh, we think at that moment when we lose somebody close, we can't go on. We're devastated. But life goes on. Life finds a way. And that is, again, something that I take away from this example of the rich man and Lazarus. That there are these great takeaways. Great takeaways. That life goes on. And I'm encouraged by that. Watching Isaiah come through the door just now, it made me smile. I was not smiling at any of you. No. I was smiling at my little friend, Isaiah. He's a great little guy. And now he's got a little sister, Phoebe. And we look forward to her growing up and watching her mature. Life continues. Life goes on. And I realize that after my departure, life will go on. But what I do now is so vital to me. And that's why I have to be selfish in this life. I have to do what's right in order that I can be made secure, in order that I can try to teach others. Because one day I'm no longer going to be. That I will be like that vapor that appears for a little while, then it's gone. And I know I will remain etched in the minds of Linda, of my son Jacob, and Micah, and Adam for a while. I know that. I know that I probably won't be etched in the minds of my grandchildren for very long, because sadly we don't know them that much. And for others that we have held near and dear. But in time, that'll be gone. That'll be forgotten. As well it should. Because then we have to take from what we leave behind as our legacy. The rich man undoubtedly had a great legacy of wealth that he left behind to those who would be his benefactors. But he didn't leave behind the greatest legacy of all. Lazarus did. Because what Lazarus left behind was a life well lived. A life lived in harmony of looking toward God. A life not unlike Job. I mean, when you get in and look at the first chapter of Job, in the second chapter, oh, you see the poor miserable man. Oh, how miserable he must have been. He had sores from head to toe. He was scraping them with a potsherd. I can only imagine. Several years ago, I was asked to do a lecture, take part in a lectureship in Clovis. And I gladly consented. They asked me like 6 months ahead of time. And so the time came. And it was while I was here. And I had a case of shingles. Oh, it's miserable. Miserable. I talked to Mike Palazzolo. Mike, what can I do? He goes, you really can't do anything. You can't do anything. That was Martha's husband, who was a doctor. My doctor was out of town. And I said, okay, well, I'll go and I'll do the meeting. And so I went and did the meeting, stricken with shingles like you wouldn't believe. And yeah, I'll agree with that, Isaiah. Oh, it was. But I went and did it. Miserable. But I didn't want anybody to know that I was stricken. Linda knew, nobody else knew. I don't think anybody else knows till right now. But I can relate to what it was that Job must have gone through. And what Lazarus must have gone through. Only they did it for a lot longer. I think I was afflicted for like 3 weeks. That was long enough. But these men left behind a legacy. And the legacy is of a life well lived. So I know that when my time of departure comes, it's not going to be one fraught with a lot of money. You're there in Ecclesiastes. Look at the 2nd chapter. And in verse 21, when there is a man who has labored with wisdom, knowledge, and skill, then he gives his legacy to one who has not labored with them. This too is vanity and a great evil. Now I realize that he's not talking about what I'm talking about, but I think in a way he is. Because what is the greatest legacy we can leave behind? And it's not money. It is the tenor of our life. What have we done with our life? How have we lived life? How have we functioned in life? That is what it's all about. And that is a takeaway out of this story of the rich man and Lazarus. So next week, what the lesson is going to be about, and these were kind of designed to dovetail together, if you would. So next week, what the lesson is going to be about is blunt honesty with self. Oh, that's so hard, to be blunt and honest. To look at yourself in the mirror. The other day, I was filling out the information for Real ID. And Linda was helping me because she likes to help me. She begged me, can I please help you? Please, please, please. Anyways, it came to the point where height and weight. And so I put down my height. Linda looked at me and she said, okay, now for the weight. And I said, you're going to wait. That's all right. But that's what you do. Blunt honesty. How honest are you? I wasn't too honest, no. How honest are you? Do you see yourself for what you really are? And I'm not talking about the physical look. But who am I really? Who am I? What is it that I portray to others? Because that's what I want people to remember me by. And that when I depart from this life, I want to find myself being comforted in Abraham's bosom, knowing that I've done everything that I could to align myself with the God of heaven. Well, there may be some takeaways that you came away with that I hadn't thought of. Remember the lesson that I gave on lessons from a rubber chicken a long time ago? And I was surprised that I asked that question. I said, well, what other lessons can you think of? And Janice came with 2 or 3 written down. Terry DeBruler brought me another rubber chicken that was kind of apportioned a little bit differently. Others talked about different things. And so I've got another whole lesson on lessons you can learn from a rubber chicken that were given to me by other people. And so I probably have 2 or 3 or 4 lessons of what you can learn from a rubber chicken. I mean, I could hold a gospel meeting on rubber chickens if I could find a congregation willing to have me come and do it. But it would all be because of your takeaways from that simple lesson. So what other things can you think of from this illustration, truthful illustration of the rich man and Lazarus? Well, the lesson is yours this afternoon, and I'm giving you about 10 minutes. So at some point, I've written it down. Time out while I write it down. 10 minutes. So somewhere along the line, and this pen doesn't work. But I do want to make sure that I've got these 10 minutes. So somewhere along the line, I have 10 minutes that I'm going to buy back from you. But the lesson is yours. And if there's any that might be subject to the invitation anyway, and I don't mean to make light of it when I talk about 10 minutes here or there. What we talk about is serious. And yes, we can talk about things serious and smile every once in a while. But ultimately, we're going to have to stand before the God of heaven and give an account for ourselves. We only have one shot. That's all we have. Let's make the best of it.